Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Ever feel like, you're playing a role even when you're not on stage?
Mm,
Like wearing a mask, we're diving into a novel that really explores those hidden stories we all carry around.
yeah.
Literary fiction, but with a theatrical backdrop.
Okay.
So if you're into that, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of our deep dives.
Awesome.
So the book we're unpacking today is called The Wardrobe Department.
Okay.
It's by Elaine Garvey, and you can find the link in the description.
Great.
It's about this young Irish woman. Her name is Mairéad.
Okay.
She's working as a dresser in a London theater back in 2002.
Hmm.
And she's working on this really demanding production of Chekhov's Uncle Vanya.
Wow.
But, it's her own internal drama that really takes center stage in the story.
I see.
Body image, family secrets, even like a hidden crush.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's all set against the backdrop of the Queen Mother's death, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, wow. That adds a whole other layer to it, doesn't it? Thinking about how we deal with like societal grief on top of everything else.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
That's a great point. But, even just the way Garvey, the author, describes the behind-the-scenes world of the theater, I mean, it's captivating.
Right.
The wardrobe department, all the little details, the tasks, the challenges, it's like you're really there.
It's a world that most people never get to see, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of like a character in itself, wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally.
All those costumes and deadlines, those diva personalities, it really sets the stage.
Yeah, for Mairéad's journey, for sure. So let's talk about Mairéad. She's our main character.
Right.
What really struck you about her?
I think for me, it's her struggle with belonging. Being Irish, but in London, always feeling like an outsider, trying to figure out where she fits in.
You can really tell she's observant. Like she's taking everything in, analyzing all the people around her,
Yes.
trying to make sense of it all. And she's got this really sharp wit, too.
Right. There's this resilience to her, sense of humor,
It makes her very relatable.
even when she's maybe making choices you wouldn't expect.
Oh, yeah, speaking of choices, we have to talk about her crush on Scott Gilburn.
Ooh, yes. The actor.
Yes, he plays Dr. Astrov. It's a whole other layer to her story, isn't it?
It is. It's not just romantic, though, is it? It's like she sees something in him that she feels is missing in her own life.
Right.
That confidence, charisma, like a world she wants to be a part of.
But she's also intimidated by him, right? Especially compared to all the other women in the theater.
Exactly.
And her body image issues play into that a lot.
They do. She's always comparing herself, always aware of how she looks,
It really affects how she interacts with everyone.
especially with Scott.
Yeah. And this whole thing with body image really ties back into the bigger theme, appearances versus reality,
Oh, I see what you mean.
which is like central to the book.
Yeah, because the theater itself is all about creating an illusion,
Exactly.
presenting a certain image to the audience. It's like it mirrors how all the characters are acting in their real lives, too.
Right, like they're all wearing masks to some extent.
And Mairéad, most of all, I think.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Mm.
What does it actually take to, set those masks, to be your true self?
That's the big question.
But she's surrounded by all these, larger-than-life personalities, and they're all playing their parts.
Both on stage and off.
Let's talk about some of them. The supporting characters are amazing. I love the Market.
The head of wardrobe?
Yeah. She's so tough, but you can tell she's got this hidden vulnerability.
It's like she's built up these walls to protect herself.
And then there's Jackie. She's a dresser, too, but so outspoken.
Ambitious.
A total force of nature. Always pushing Mairéad to, get out of her comfort zone.
I love that dynamic between them.
It's like Jackie represents that side of Mairéad that she's afraid to let out.
The bold, uninhibited side.
Ex-
And then you've got Philippa, who's much more composed,
Driven.
focused.
She knows what she wants.
Each of them, in their own way, is like a mirror for Mairéad.
Showing her different ways to be a woman, to be in the world.
And of course, we can't forget Oliver Bow, the play's producer.
Oh, he's a piece of work. A real villain.
He's almost like a caricature, the demanding producer.
But there's a real darkness to him.
A real tension.
He really embodies the worst parts of the theater world, right?
The exploitation, the power dynamics.
The pressure to conform.
And you see all that play out in his interactions with Mairéad, especially that big confrontation scene.
It's intense.
It's a reminder that these power imbalances exist everywhere.
Not just in the theater. It's like a microcosm of the real world.
Makes you realize that sometimes you have to stand up to that power, even if it's scary.
Even when there might be consequences.
Definitely. But one of the most important themes in the book, I think, is identity and belonging.
Especially for Mairéad, being Irish in London.
Right.
You can feel how she's constantly reminded of being an outsider. you know?
Whether it's intentional or not.
Like her background is always shaping how she sees herself.
And how she moves through the world.
And this ties into her relationship with her family, too.
Especially her mother. There's so much unspoken history there.
That tension, like a weight she's carrying.
And that brings us to the heart of it all, the family secrets, the trauma.
Oh, yeah. Passed down through generations.
And her trip back to Ireland for her grandmother's funeral, that really becomes a turning point.
It forces her to confront some really difficult truths.
It's like she's unraveling the layers of her family history, trying to figure out where she fits in.
It's both painful and liberating.
A real journey of self-discovery. It's like that trip to Ireland for the funeral. You know, it really becomes a turning point in the story.
Yeah, like it brings everything to the surface.
All those unspoken things.
You see her interacting with her family, and it's like you could just feel the weight of all that history.
Especially with her mother, right?
Oh, absolutely. That relationship is so strained.
And the novel, like, reveals those family secrets so slowly through these little memories and whispers.
Yeah, it's really well done.
And then we learn the truth about her parents' marriage.
Oh my God, yes. That was such a powerful moment.
It completely changes how she sees everything, her whole childhood.
It's like appearances versus reality, but on this deeply personal level.
Right. It makes you think about how we build up these stories about the people we love.
And how sometimes the truth can be really hard to face.
But also freeing, in a way.
For sure. It feels like that's when Mairéad starts to see her mother as a real person, not just mom, you know?
Like someone who's been shaped by their own experiences.
Exactly.
It's all about empathy, right? Understanding that everyone has their own story.
And that scene in the car on the way to the airport.
Oh, yeah.
Where Mairéad and her mom finally have that real conversation.
So raw.
So emotional. But it felt like a real turning point for them.
It's like that vulnerability opens up a space for healing. And it also shows how complicated female relationships can be.
Yes. There's competition, definitely, maybe even some conflict between the women in the book.
But there's also this underlying current of support.
Little moments of kindness.
Like when Anya helps Mairéad with that cut on her back.
Or when Margaret talks about losing her best friend.
And even Jackie, who can be a lot, you know?
Oh, totally.
But she's the one who pushes Mairéad to embrace her desires.
That scene with the chocolate?
Yes. It's playful on the surface, but it's really about self-acceptance, right?
Allowing yourself to experience pleasure, which is something Mairéad really struggles with.
Especially when it comes to her body.
It's like Jackie represents this whole other way of being.
This uninhibited sensuality.
Which kind of scares Mairéad, but also attracts her.
It's a really interesting contrast, and the way the novel handles Mairéad's body image issues, it's so honest.
It's something a lot of people can relate to, unfortunately.
Those insecurities, that constant inner critic.
I remember that scene where she tries on Professor Serebrnikov's costume.
Oh, yeah, the trousers, the waistcoat.
She wants to feel powerful, but it just makes her more self-conscious.
It shows that real confidence has to come from within, right?
It's not about the clothes, it's about who you are.
And I wonder if, for Mairéad, those body image issues are tied to her bigger struggle with identity.
I think you're right. She's trying to figure out who she is in the midst of all these expectations.
From her family, from society.
From the theater world itself.
There's this line from Margaret that really stayed with me. She says, "We give up too much for this place, forcing people to perform when they are in pain."
That is such a powerful line.
Like it's talking about the cost of hiding your true self.
Of pretending to be someone you're not.
And then, of course, Mairéad decides to leave the theater.
It's a big turning point.
It makes you wonder what's next for her.
I was struck by that final scene where she's watching the crowds at the Queen Mother's lying in state.
Yeah.
She's feeling so lost. And then she sees this woman adjusting her clothes, making sure everything's perfect.
It's such a small detail, but so powerful.
It's like Mairéad realizes she doesn't need the theater to find herself.
Right. Strength comes from within.
And that phone call with her dad at the end, he tells her to come home, but he also acknowledges how hard it's been for her.
It felt like a real shift in their relationship.
Like they're finally starting to understand each other.
There's hope there.
It's not a, happy ending exactly, but it feels hopeful.
She's back in London, but she's different now.
She's grown so much.
Now that you mention it, it's interesting how clothing, like costumes and stuff, become such a powerful metaphor throughout the whole book.
Oh, totally. They represent so much more than just fashion.
Yeah, yeah.
Like identity.
Transformation.
Even protection, in a way.
You see it with Mairéad's job, right? As a dresser.
Right.
Handling all the garments, helping the actors become their characters.
Like she's part of that transformation.
Almost like a ritual.
And then there's her own style, her fascination with menswear.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
It's like she's looking for a way to express herself. that's different,
That challenges the norms.
Exactly.
I think it's about more than just how the clothes look, though. It's about that feeling of control, of comfort.
Especially in a world that feels so chaotic.
Like she's trying to, I don't know, armor herself.
Yeah, I get that. There's that scene where she buys those patent leather loafers.
The ones that are way too small.
Yes. And she tries to stretch them out by, like, freezing them with bags of water inside.
It's such a funny little detail.
It is.
But it shows how she's trying to force herself to fit in, you know?
Into something that's not really right for her.
Just like with the theater world.
It's so true. I love how the book contrasts that whole world of the theater,
The illusion of it all.
Yeah, with how real and raw Mairéad's personal life feels.
It's like the theater becomes this like mini version of the world where everyone's playing a part.
Putting on a show.
But behind the scenes, it's messy,
Real life is happening.
And for Mairéad, who's already trying to figure out who she is, that contrast is really hard.
She's always trying to balance those two realities.
It makes you think, right? Even in a world that's obsessed with image, real connection comes from just being yourself.
Letting your guard down.
Showing your true self.
And I really liked that the book doesn't try to tie everything up neatly.
Oh, I agree.
It leaves you with questions, which feels very real.
Like what's going to happen to Mairéad now?
Exactly. What choices is she going to be?
Who's she going to become?
But you also get the sense that she's finally on the right track.
Even if it's a little bit messy.
I keep thinking about that last scene with her on Lambeth Bridge.
Watching the crowds.
She's an observer, but she's also really present in that moment.
And when she starts to cry, it's not for the Queen Mother, right?
It's for her grandmother.
That really shows how much she's grown.
It's like she's accepting the loss, but also the love.
And that call with her dad, he tells her to come home, but he also understands what she's been through.
Yeah, that felt really important.
Like they're finally bridging that gap between them.
There's a lot of love there, even if it's complicated.
It's a bittersweet ending, for sure.
But there's so much hope, too.
She goes back to London, but she's not the same Mairéad anymore.
She's faced some tough truth about herself and her family.
And that's created space for something new.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the wardrobe department, I want to leave you with this. What's next for Mairéad? What will she create?
What stories will she tell?
What costumes will she wear?
What roles will she choose to play?
It's a reminder that we all have the power to shape our own stories.
Even when things feel chaotic.
We can find our own voices, create our own endings. Thanks for joining us.
And be sure to share your favorite moments from the book in the comments. We'd love to hear what resonated with you.
Until next time.